So, welcome back from the break. Hi, Martina. So, welcome to Martina's talk about UX. So as a backend entwickler, backend developer, this is a completely magic topic. So I'm happy to learn something new from you. So enjoy the stage is yours and enjoy your talk.
Thanks. Welcome everybody to my talk, UX improvements of forms or how to get users annoyed. First of all, I want to introduce myself, of course. I'm Martina Linnemann. I'm a software engineer in the operations department at Shopware AG, and I've been a developer now for over 6 years. Within those 6 years, I gathered a lot of web development experience. And one of those topics I encountered not only as a developer, but also as a user, I want to talk about today. So let me jump into why I want to talk about UX improvements of forms. So imagine your browser has auto-saved your address, email address, etc., and you want to fill in a form, for example, like on the slide where you want to be a new customer in an online shop. And the auto-completion suggests, the auto-saved data for you to fill in. And if you click on it, in this case, it fills in the data correctly. It misses some of inputs down below, which might be another problem, but it seems like to be working. Of course, Chromium, which I used to make the screenshot, doesn't show all the data it will fill in. There are other browsers that do so, but in this case, you're quite happy. But I encountered as user also forms where this didn't work. So I wanted to fill in the form with the autofilled data, and it kind of messed up everything because it filled in inputs with the wrong values, because the forms did, or the input fields didn't match the value that was entered, which is kind of frustrating. I think every one of us has encountered once where we had to fill in forms, and it can be quite annoying because it's repetitive, and you think then, okay, maybe through this feature it won't take so long, and then you have to reverse everything and do it again manually, and it's really frustrating. But there are also other things, not only in forms, of course, but also quite annoying in forms is when the focus isn't visible when you use your keyboard navigation. So in this example, the focus is only visible because it was, because it is adjusted in the styles of the HTML. So otherwise, it wouldn't be visible at all. I used the keyboard navigation there on the side, and in some cases, it made the focus visible, and in some, it didn't. And somehow, sometimes I wasn't sure if it was even in focus or not. And all those things and a lot of more left me to be quite frustrated and thinking about it like, I'm a developer. Why should it be so hard? I should know also myself how to improve such issues if we have to encounter it while developing. Because as a developer, front-end developer, you have to create forms at least once in your career, I think. And therefore, I thought about, but how does it all work really, and how to improve this behavior so our customers or our users are not as annoyed as stated on this picture. But before I want to tell you about how to improve it and why we do it even, I want to tell you a bit more, like give you more examples how to annoy users when using forms. So about keyboard navigation, I talked about it before. It's not even that it's sometimes not working at all, but it's also sometimes weird behavior. So when you use tab to get into the next form field and you end up completely on a different area on that page and you don't know where you are anymore. But there's also like implicit submit. Maybe you have encountered it as a user already. So sometimes when you have to log in, this is quite common that you only have to enter your email and your password, and then there is no submit button, but you just use enter, and then it submits. But sometimes this isn't even the case when there is a submit button, so you can't implicit submit on the last form field, which might be intended as it is, but sometimes it might not. But there's also a problem with only using implicit submit because not all browsers support it. So this can be quite annoying for users that don't have a browser supporting this feature and not be able to use that form at all. And there is also, of course, autofilling or auto-completion when it's not working because it fills in the wrong data and so on, or it doesn't even suggest autofilling. Then this can be quite annoying if you have to fill in again an address form, and if you've done so many times before for like every online shop or for every account you created, this can be quite annoying. But there are also smaller things like missing area attributes, especially if you think about accessibility. This is quite a pain point sometimes. And also regarding that, using wrong semantics. So you can see on the right side a button with the text, this is a link, because it isn't a button really. It behaves like a link, but it looks like a button, and it uses the button HTML tag. And this gets quite confusing for screen readers. So they would treat it as a button, although the behavior of it behind it is a link and not a button. But also sometimes it's just as simple as you don't know the format for the input. Like if you have to input your birthday and you don't know in what kind of format, because there are many formats around the world how to write dates. This can be quite annoying if it's an international software, for example. So we have now a bit of like accessibility issues and also some other annoying factors. They can be encountered throughout mobile devices and desktop. But now I want to come to one point when you think about mobile or responsive, like if you have an on-screen keyboard and not using your desktop, it can be quite annoying if you have a form where you maybe, for example, want to fill in your credit card number. The correct type for that input is text, because the credit card number happens to be digits, but behind it there is a string. It's a string, and it's just coincidence that it is a number. And therefore, the type has to be text and not numbers, because if you use number as input type, you also get up and down arrows in the input field. So if you then use maybe, for example, keyboard navigation, it could happen by mistake that you change a digit in your credit card number and then it will make it all wrong. Therefore, you have to use type text. But if you want users to have like as on-screen keyboard layout only digits, you can declare the input mode so it is numeric and you don't have like as you can see in the screenshot on the right side, you don't have this whole keyboard layout but only digits instead. And this can be quite time saving, but also if you think about it vice versa, it's quite annoying if you have like only numerics if you want to enter a text. So therefore this can be quite an issue if it doesn't work correctly. And yeah, so we have, and that were only examples. There are many more, I'm sure of it. But yeah, now we know how we can annoy users, but why do we do it? So first of all, it's of course lack of awareness. Sometimes the issues are unknown because they only happen to be an issue in some kind of browsers, for example, or we haven't heard about them before. Sometimes it's also the improvements are not always visible, because if you adjust like area tags and you don't use a screen reader, you might not see the difference there. And of course, it's also sometimes because of mindset. I'm sure nearly every one of us have heard the sentence, "It works on my machine," and I'm sure that many of us also said it ourselves at least once. And sometimes it's that pain points, if they don't affect us, they are not that visible for us. They are not that regarded that high as an issue, because if we don't encounter it, why should it be an issue? And then there's also the effect that most of the forms, they are only one-time use for like the users itself. So it doesn't get that recognized as an issue if it's not that UX friendly, because the users only have to encounter it once. But if you have many forms on different pages and so on, and you have to fill out different stuff, it can be quite annoying as a user. And also it's just not only because you don't have to do it more than once on this page, maybe it doesn't mean that it can't be improved and make it your experience with the brand even more better if there were some small improvements made. But there are also other reasons, of course. Sometimes it's only lack of knowledge. So if you think about a student or someone just starting their career, it can be that they don't know better because they haven't heard about some things. And even if you're more into your career, I think there's always something to learn, and that you might not know about all of those issues. And then there is, of course, the lack of time and priority for improvements. As I said, sometimes forms are for one-time use, and therefore it might not be the highest priority to improve those. And especially if you have lack of time and have to implement other functionality, this might be an issue. And last but not least, but maybe the more surprising one, is because we have to. sometimes we just have to. On the right, you see an example from our account where we had to make sure that our users will read the text and will be sure that what they are doing when finalizing the step. So we had in the past, we had some users calling our support that they accidentally finalized the step, and we were like, how can you accidentally finalize it? You had to click a checkbox, you had to then afterwards click on that button and stuff like that. And since it was kind of frustrating because it wasn't really wanted to make it reversible from a business point of view, therefore it wasn't implemented. And if the customers were regarded as really valuable, and we had to reverse it somehow. It was kind of time intensive to do so, and therefore we added another checkbox, and afterwards another checkbox, and then an input field to make sure that they have to enter the correct domain to be able to finalize it. And I know this might not be the best solution at all, but we tried to think about a solution that makes sure that not everyone can just finalize it and then claim to do it accidentally. And therefore, we had to make sure that the UX isn't so good anymore, because of course the UX is terrible if you have to check 4 checkboxes or and then also input your domain name, and then you are allowed to click the button when you could only click 1 checkbox and then submit it, which would be much faster, and they are maybe annoyed by it, but we had to. And that's sometimes the trade-off you have to do. But I think in the most cases we want the UX to be good, and therefore I want to talk about how to stop being annoying. So how to stop annoying users with our forms. First of all, there are different steps you should take, you should have a look at. And the first of all is you should think about your goal. And that's quite important, as you have to think about what you want to achieve from a business side. So do you have to have a trade-off or not? And then you should also think about personas. So who is interacting with your form? What kind of knowledge do they have regarding if they are some special elements in your form or not? And also, do they might have a disability and might not be able to just use the form the way you would use it? And also regarding that, disability, sometimes it's not only the disability of a user, but of a browser. So you should also think about if it is accessible by the browsers you support. And I'm not sure if everyone has heard of it, but there's this site, it's called Can I Use It? Or Can I Use, I think is the URL. And there you can type in what you want to use, and then it states in which browser it is supported, in which versions. And also sometimes there are some additional notes to it. And in this example, it's the autocomplete attribute, to which I will come later on. So if you have thought about your goal, your personas, and if they can use it, let me tell you about some examples where you might be able to improve your UX for forms. So first of all, there is the possibility of top index. But I think in 90%, the top index might be hell and not heaven. So if you think about, on the left side, you see a form, and there you can see it is clustered for left fields and right fields, so they are styled accordingly. And yeah, then there is a top index, but why? So on the right side, you can see how the tab behavior should be like if you use keyboard navigation. So there should be the behavior that you go from the left side to the right side, then down below on the left side again, and so on. And since they are not in the order you would assume for the tabbing behavior to be working that way, there's this tab index used. And this might work really well on a page with only this card and there's nothing else, and you know where your tab index starts. But this can be quite the hell if you have other cards on it with other forms and so on. And then you might have only set the tab index for one form, but not for the others. And it can lead to the behavior that you start at the top, then go right to the bottom, and then afterwards go back up, and you don't know where you are anymore. And this is quite frustrating, and therefore you should be really careful about using tab index. And I think it's more a dark pattern than something you should use in the normal use case. So as I said, I think in 90% it's hell, but if you just have a small card, then it can be really heaven if you have like a lot of navigation items and you want to have a different tabbing behavior and so on. And also what's kind of intriguing on the left side for the form is, as I said, it's clustered for left and right fields. It's not in the order you would expect it to be. So it's this order that screen readers use it. So it can be quite irritating if your screen reader tells you should enter the zip code and the street and then afterwards the email and then the city and the country. So it's kind of irritating and not a good way of doing things. But then there's also not how the keyboard behaves and all that, but there's also sometimes some small things like visual assistance, which can be quite an improvement. And sometimes they are also easy to do. This is a more extensive example here, but if you think about your forms and think about, are hints needed? For example, if a placeholder is really needed, sometimes it also makes sense to have a hint underneath the field with the placeholder or the information that's omitted through the placeholder as well, because if you type, then the placeholder is gone, and if you have like a problem with remembering things, this can be an issue, of course. And then also not only hints regarding that, but if you have like requirements of what to enter, this might be needed as well. And of course, if you enter things that aren't correct or aren't valid for a kind of form, then you should ask yourself when or how to display those errors. Because if you enter the complete form manually and then at the end you click submit and you get an error, it's quite frustrating. And if you want to stop being annoying, then you might be able to do so by displaying an error before using client-side validators, for example, for email or for for new password fields and so on. And then you can indicate for the user where there's an error, and you can maybe even make them aware of it in a really good way, where he knows everything he needs to do, and not only, okay, there's an error. So it can be time saving if there are all requirements stated below a form field, and then the user only has to meet all those criteria. And this is sometimes it can be a really quick adjustment using client-side validators. For example, for emails, there are sometimes already validators you can use submitted by your framework of choice and so on. And also sometimes they can be reused, and so it's an easy adjustment, but it can help the user a lot. For example, for an email, if you have a typo and there missed a dot or something, it can be quite annoying if you don't see it before submit. And I told you about the experience of myself about autofilling and how annoying it was sometimes, and how frustrated I was that it wasn't implemented better. And then I thought for myself, yeah, but how does it work at all? And I didn't know, and I didn't know how to make it better. Then I thought maybe this should be something I should have a look into. As I said, sometimes why we are annoying is because we don't know better. Therefore, I want to give you some knowledge about autofilling. First of all, the important data for autofilling. Some browsers are already supporting the autocomplete attribute, but for others which aren't, or also if you haven't submitted the autocomplete attribute, there are also other clues they use. So the clues are the name, of course, the type, ID, and sometimes if you have something like a form control name, I'm not sure if it's in other frameworks the same, but in Angular it's called form control name. They can be used as well to think about what values are valid for those form fields. And also the label text. If you have a label and have added the for which ID it is, then it can also be used to check against it. And so there are different clues browsers use, and they might not all work the same because they use heuristics. So it may differ between browsers, but if you use the autocomplete attribute, which of course only works if you have browsers compatible to it, but then it is not that random than how it's working like the clues, because it doesn't use like regex patterns and heuristics and stuff like that, but it checks against special values, and they are stated in a HTML standard, and you can look it up. And therefore, I want to show you an example how to make this possible, the autofilling with the autocomplete attribute. And in this example, you can see we have, of course, we have the type. So the type is text. Okay, it's not that much of a clue. And we have a form control name, for example, company name. But this doesn't work in all browsers, or in most I tested doesn't work at all. So not only for some browsers, but for most of them. But if you use the autocomplete attribute value organization, then it recognizes it as your organization. So if you add it as a part of your data for autofilling, which you have stored in your browser and so on. This can be autofilled automatically, and you don't have to type it in manually. But there's also, for example, the postal code. Many browsers, they recognize zip or postal code or postcode if they don't have the autocomplete attribute. But for example, zip code makes a problem, and therefore it's quite random sometimes, and it's really better and future-proof to use the autocomplete attribute because it is explicit. All the other things are implicit. They are used within heuristics. They are checked against a regex pattern that might be different from browser to browser. But with this, it works also in not only in one browser, but in many browsers. And yeah, as I said, you have to store the data for it to be available to autofill it. And there are also some difference between the browsers, as I said, because all browsers have, or nearly all browsers have, a built-in function for autofilling, which isn't exactly the same. They might be differences. For example, sometimes you only have email, name, and then maybe also organization. Sometimes you even have the addresses and can also add different addresses. But this varies. And there's also the possibility for to use browser extensions to autofill it. Not only password managers. Of course, password managers is now a big thing regarding autofilling, as many of us use password managers, and they also have the possibility to store your identity, kind of, where you can add things like your name and your organization, and it is also used for autofilling. What you have to keep in mind, if you use a password manager browser extension, you can't use the built-in functions. So they are overwriting itself, and therefore you might not have the same data available. And then there's also the possibility for other browser extensions. I listed here one, which gives you the opportunity to fill in a form and then generate the autofilling data with this form. So it can be used for another form with the same kind of data. If they have the same form fields, it can be reused again. So you only have to use it once, or have to put it in once. It's working similar to the autosave functions of your browser. And if I tell you about autofilling, there's also some things you can have a look at to improve it. It's, for example, the CSS pseudo classes autofill and WebKit autofill, which are there for styling the input which was autofilled, because sometimes, like in the first example I showed you why I wanted to give this talk, it was about the online shop customer input field, and there you could see that only the name and address was displayed as suggested autofill data, but for example also the email was filled in. And so for users to recognize what was filled in by the autofilling and not filled in from the website itself, or if you haven't had a look at it, if it is correct or not, it's really good to have an indicator through the styling to have a look at it. But then there's also the possibility to set the autocomplete to off. So you can use off as value for autocomplete. Why do we have this, and why is it something to improve the autofilling user experience? So for some fields, you don't want autofilling. Like if you have a one-time password or verifications codes, then it isn't that wanted to have auto-completion, or at least I think in most of the cases it isn't. And therefore, it can be better for the user experience to set it to off, because they don't have to reverse what was filled into it and then add the correct value. And also, you have to think about autofilling also from a user perspective. So if you want to improve your user experience yourself, you have to think about if you want, first of all, if you want to store the data, but also if you want it to be autofilled directly by entering a site, if you want it only to be filled in after you click on it, and so on. You have to think about that there might be some privacy risks if you enter data through autofilling, because sometimes form fields can be hidden, and then there can also be data filled into it only for you not to see it. And then other developers with bad intentions can use this data, and even if you don't want it, you just entered it for them. And therefore, it might be also a good way of improving things if you have a look, is this site trustful? Of course, I think we should always do it, but there's sometimes the thinking, is there are some other data which will be filled in which shouldn't. In other browsers than Chrome, I think in Firefox, for example, it is stated which data will be filled in. They also state if email is filled in, if address, phone number, etc. So you can check that against the form fields you can see, and then really evaluate if you want to use the auto-completion. Now, I talked a lot about auto-completion and auto-filling, but that's not all, of course, and I also had some other examples, but just a small input about smaller improvements. Some things which can be done quite easy is, for example, to make the focus visible or to use placeholders. And of course, for accessibility, you should use area attributes and roles. In the example I gave you about the button, which was acting like a link, you could use the role attribute and state that it is a link. Then the screen reader would pretend that it is a link, although it claims to be a button. And then there's the possibility to, of course, to use the input mode to declare it that you want, for example, numeric input. And if you talk about input, there's also sometimes the issue with formatting. So if you enter, for example, credit card numbers, it might be easier to check if you entered it correctly, if you have the same format than you would have on your credit card itself. And therefore, there exists libraries like, for example, Cleave.js, and it makes for the user easier to check against it. And that's really about how to stop being annoying and think about small improvements. But if you want to talk about user experience, there is also something which I might have to add, is that you have to prevent bias. So for those of you who don't know what bias is, it's if you prefer or favor with your software or with your thinking, a culture or an opinion or something else, So, for example, if you think about addresses, there are different formats in the world, and if you have a more deeper look into it, then you may notice that in the Western cultures, it's more similar through all the Western countries than it is to, for example, Asian addresses. So therefore, if you use addresses or if you ask the user to enter addresses in your forms, it's something you really should think about, because they might not have the same structure as yours. And also, if you think about autocompletion, you should also think about it carefully. So if you use, for example, street address as autocompletion attribute, it will have the street address, of course. But if you use address line 1, 2, 3, for example, they are more narrow and more biased towards different countries and might not be available even for all countries you want as home countries for your users. So therefore you have to really think about it to make it real inclusive and improve the user experience, not only for those near to you but also for everyone else. And now I want to come to the end, and therefore I want to give you some key takeaways. So first of all, use your forms like a user. If you use it like you think a user would, like different personas with maybe also with disabilities, and then have a look at it. If you can use keyboard navigation, if screen readers are working or not, and then you can see really what are the pain points of your forms and how to stop being annoying. And also, one takeaway is improvements can be small things like making the focus visible, using placeholders. It's not always this big adjustment you need to make it better. And last but not least, think about bias. Especially in forms, it can be quite biased towards Western culture and quite irritating for Asian people to input their data into your form. And with that, I want to conclude with, let's discuss maybe now or afterwards how you prefer. Here you have my contacts, how to reach me. If you want to have a chat afterwards, feel free to do so. Write me, or ask now. And
So thank you for your talk, and give some insights of how to improve the your UX improvement experience. So let me check the YouTube chat if there are some questions. I think we have to wait some seconds because we have a delay on the stream. So I hope you enjoy your talk, and we will see you on the work adventure for some connection networking. So,
yes.
but I don't think there are no questions in the stream. So again, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you for having me.
And we will see in the work adventure.
Okay.
So
thanks. See you later.
See you later. So, and for the streaming, we are now at the work adventure for networking. So when you want to join us and speak with the speaker, so please go to Work Adventure. And thank you that you are staying with us with Cyberland, and enjoy the night, evening, and the weekend. Bye bye.